Wind, solar, and battery storage had a really good year last year in 2020, and it looks poised to have an even better year in 2021 globally and a great decade. This is clean energy is going to be expanding significantly, especially in Europe and the United States. And so we're going to talk to Robert Hornung of the Canadian Renewable Energy Association about what's going on in Canada. So welcome to the interview, Robert.
Thank you very much. Happy to be here.
Why don't we start with a review of last year and what you expect for this year?
Yeah, so last year as we all know, the world was challenged by 2020, and that's also true of industries like our own. And so in terms of new installed capacity, we saw less installed last year than we would have expected at the start of the year. That's a product of disruption to supply chains in these global industries, precautions related to COVID in terms of ensuring the health and safety of workers. So in total, we had about 250 megawatts of new wind and solar capacity installed in Canada in 2020. But we had about 1,000 megawatts of wind and solar begin construction. Some of that had hoped to be completed by 2020, but it's now rolling into 2021. So we expect to see at least 1,000 megawatts installed in total of wind and solar in 2021, and we expect to see another 1,000 megawatts start construction in 2021. So 2020 has been a challenging year, but we've got a lot of sort of work on the ground that's going to ensure that 2021 is a big success.
Now, I understand there's about 120 megawatts of battery storage across the country, but the One NIDA project that I interviewed some folks about that last week, will bring 250 megawatts online in southwestern Ontario not long from now. Are we expecting a lot more battery storage being adopted going forward?
I think there's certainly very significant and growing interest in the deployment of not just battery storage, but all different types of energy storage, frankly. And the barrier there, frankly, is market structures. So, for example, in some jurisdictions, for example, Alberta, Ontario, are still actually working out how to redesign their markets to account for energy storage. Energy storage is not a load, it's not a generator, it's not a transmission line. It's something totally different that has elements of all of those, and our markets don't know how to recognize that yet. So there's a lot of good work underway, which will unleash a lot of this potential. Because we are seeing anyone who's developing projects these days, for example, anybody developing a utility scale solar project is automatically thinking, am I going to incorporate storage with this project as well? Because it allows these projects to provide a broader range of services to the electricity grid, and diversifies the amount of potential revenue streams that those projects can secure as well. So yeah, it's definitely on the upward side.
Where are the wind and solar projects being deployed? And we have a variety of different approaches in Canada. We have Alberta, which has a functioning market. We have Ontario, which is sort of a market. The rest are kind of vertically integrated, provincially owned crown corporations, so no market. And I'm kind of curious to see where the wind and solar and battery are going to be deployed in 2021.
Well, I think if we look across the country, you're going to see there's, Alberta is the focal point for the industry right now, and that is very much tied to two things. It's tied to the market structure, which does provide opportunities for people to come forward sort of independent of a utility. But it's also tied to the decarbonization effort underway in Alberta and the phase out of coal, which is creating a lot of space for new technology to come forward. Saskatchewan will be announcing the results of a 300 megawatt RFP for wind energy soon in 2021. So that will see new development there. And there are a number of projects under construction already in Saskatchewan. In the Atlantic provinces, we have a number of smaller projects under construction, and Nova Scotia this year is actually also taking a step to open up their market to enable some of that bilateral contracting between corporations and developers going forward. So that'll be the third market in the country where that sort of thing can happen. Quebec has announced that they expect to see a shortfall in terms of energy needs before 2025. And as a result, they have already signaled that they will be launching a new commitment, a new procurement to bring on new renewable energy going forward. So, at this point in time, the focus is in Alberta, but as we start to see, other jurisdictions continue to wrestle with decarbonization, so primarily the Maritimes, Saskatchewan, and other jurisdictions now starting to see, either through economic growth or investment in electrification, new opportunities emerging for power generation. We'll see this happening across the country.
I'm curious about your view on the role that wind, solar, and batteries will play in electrification strategies that come out of climate plans. When I think of the Clean BC, for instance, I've done a fair amount of work on interviewing experts who have done estimates of how much power it will take to electrify transportation and industry and buildings. It's quite significant. Mm-hmm. And really the only feasible way of doing it economically is wind and solar and batteries. So what role are those considerations playing in the expansion plans of your members?
Oh, I think, the industry is very bullish on opportunities in the country. As we move forward with stronger climate commitments and commitments to electrification, we feel that the technologies we represent are extremely well positioned. They're abundant, they're untapped, they're now the lowest cost option available. Working together, they can help to ensure reliability. They bring also a whole host of other environmental benefits along. So this is why you have organizations like Bloomberg and others that are saying that the overwhelming majority of new investment in the electricity sector going forward is going to be in wind, solar, and storage. And we don't expect that to be any different in Canada.
And what's the attitude of the provincial crown corporations, many of whom are in hydro, like BC, Manitoba, and Quebec? I was wondering if those utilities are looking at wind and solar as a cost-effective way of supplementing their hydro, because of course they can use hydro as storage when the wind is blowing and the sun is shining. You don't need all of that. And it seems to be just a nice fit for those hydro systems. Is that the feedback you're getting?
I think there's certainly some, significant consideration of that going on. I believe that a lot of the hydro utilities feel that they also continue to have options to retrofit or to sort of repower some of their existing facilities, which will also generate some additional power. But I do think that they do recognize that the cost competitiveness of wind and solar makes it difficult to not consider those. And as you mentioned, they recognize that they have a hydro resource that pairs very nicely with those technologies from a storage perspective. And I've always said, if there's any country in the world that can move to 100% non-emitting grid, it has to be Canada, because of its vast untapped renewable resources and the strong hydro base that can help to ensure reliability.
Final question, Robert. There are some experts I've interviewed, like Tony Seba, for instance, the Stanford economics lecturer, who talks about how wind, solar, and batteries are going to be so cheap, the marginal cost will be almost zero, and that'll lead to an abundance of electricity. So we'll be producing maybe 1.5, 2, maybe even 3 times as much as we actually need. That then calls forth all kinds of industries like hydrogen production, green hydrogen, and so on. Is that being discussed by your members and by policymakers? How we can use cheap electricity to get into some of these industries that would be job creators and investment attractors?
Oh, absolutely. And I think it's still actually being driven by a climate imperative. I mean, if you look at any scenario that talks about net zero or reducing greenhouse gas emissions by 80%, they all envision doubling or tripling the size of electricity production in the electricity market. And that's it starts with cleaning the grid, but then it's using that electricity to power transportation, to heat homes, to produce hydrogen for use in industrial applications or long-range transport. And so we do see Quebec announced this year in 2020, a major new electrification strategy, $7 billion over 5 years to promote electrification. Electrification is a constant theme in the federal government's climate change plan. We now have a national hydrogen strategy. We have hydrogen strategies under development in Quebec, Alberta, Ontario, the Maritimes as well. So there is growing attention to this. And frankly, if we're serious about our climate goals, there has to be. And yes, our industry is exploring these opportunities and is very willing to contribute in any way it can to meeting those objectives.
Robert, thank you very much for this.
Thank you very much.